A heroic phrase, mga bagong bayani, is easy to grasp by the younger generation because of its heroic connotations that are tied to the present times. But what exactly is it and how does it relate to the Philippines labor experts? In addition, where did the term come from and what does it really signify? For today's episode, we are going to talk about the Bagong Bayani and how it is perceived and what it really is. Without further ado, let me welcome you to our first episode, Ang Pilipino sa Makabagong Panahon.
The first documented OFWs were those who escaped from the Spanish galleon, but it was only during the post-colonial era when state-sponsored overseas migration began. Specifically, after late President Ferdinand Marcos launched a labor export program, thousands of Filipinos started to flock abroad. However, while it was Marcos who instigated OFW programs, it was only during Corazon Aquino's administration when the number of Filipino labor exports dramatically increased. How did this happen? It's noteworthy that Aquino was elected upon ousting Marcos. Thus, when she occupied office, the country was left in debt and poverty. Consequently, after learning that OFWs can help in paying foreign debt, Aquino created policies that promoted working abroad. It was also during her administration that social and economic landscapes transformed. For example, the Middle East started demanding domestic helpers, and the prostitution industry in the Philippines started to fade. Thus, Filipino women were encouraged to migrate overseas. Additionally, the increasing globalization called for workers from developing countries. Thus, the number of OFWs during Aquino's administration further increased. However, over the years, the increase in labor exports led to stories of loneliness and abuse. From newspapers to movies, the media narrated countless suffering stories by OFWs. Naturally, Aquino was burdened to do something, and since the previous government left the country with debt and human rights violations, Aquino was also bent on creating an administration that will help the country and all the Filipinos. So, to simultaneously overcome all of these, Aquino decided to call the OFWs Bagong Bayani.
The emergence of the middle-class workers' aid for the candidacy of Corazon Aquino was due to the crony capitalism-led corruption and the extensive development projects of the Marcos era that resulted to massive foreign debts and decline of the economy, along with widespread human rights violations that further estranged the citizens to the regime, as discussed by Encinas Franco in her paper. In addition, she also emphasized the role of the death of Ninoy Aquino, the snap election electoral fraud, and the support of the Catholic Church as favors for the People Power Revolution and the democratization process under the heroism-veiled presidency of Corazon Aquino. With her presidency being met with degenerating gross domestic product and external debts worsened by unemployment and poverty, export-oriented industrialization launched by Marcos that tolerated labor out-migration was continued since the economy was still unstable to generate local jobs, but with the priority of ensuring the welfare and protection of overseas workers. The different instances and programs during Aquino's presidency, such as the creation of the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration and Overseas Workers Welfare Administration through Executive Orders 247 and 126 respectively, increase of female contract migration due to the economic restructuring policies of the Philippines and foreign countries, the advent of civil society activism that became a bridge between the government and the condition of overseas workers, the investigations, proposed bills, and resolutions for their situation of the reinstituted Congress, and the revival of media and freedom of speech, expression, and of the press that enhanced media coverage of their plight, eventually led to Filipinos being recognized as skilled workers worldwide.
Many people believe that OFWs have big houses, crops, vehicles, and other indications of fortune. However, working as an OFW isn't as simple as it appears. Besides leaving their families in hopes of a better future, they encounter a series of other hurdles including suffering and sacrifices. However, We recognize these ultimate sacrifices as we consider them as our new heroes or Bagong Bayani. Whereas this heroic discourse appears to empower them and, in a greater perspective, constitute even beyond the greater good of the family and even the entire country, it is indeed wholly inadequate. In addition, the sacrifice and suffering of labor migrants manipulates the threats while also concealing and downplaying the underlying reasons why migrants are displayed in the first place, creating OFWs and their role in the economy that their employment abroad becomes a sacrifice that requires a degree of suffering. Despite this, Filipinos continues to choose to work abroad since they are exhausted from the suffering of deprivation, low salaries, lack of opportunities, corruption, and high utility cost. This deterministic narrative of modern heroism of domestic workers has remained constant over time. It reshapes workers' realities into idealized version of sacrifice, which has unfortunately become an acceptable recognition in the lives of every Filipino.
Filipinos have a long history of being warriors, not just for themselves, but also for their country and family, and this has been true throughout generations. That alone can be used to demonstrate that each Filipino is a modern-day hero in their own way. What more can one ask of individuals who make the sacrifice of living far away from one's family, working in a foreign country, and enduring the discrimination and abuse that goes along with it? These individuals are known as OFWs or Overseas Filipino Workers, and referring to them as Bagong Bayani will do little to alleviate the difficulties that they are experiencing. As a country, we have the right and liberty to speak up for every Bagong Bayani regardless of whether or not we know them personally. This will demonstrate how we, as Filipinos, stand up for one another and know how to call out injustices when they occur. However, more than just demonstrating the bravery and spirit of the Filipino people, these incidents also serve to highlight a compromise system that must be reformed. For the OFW's condition to improve, both the government and the citizens must work together to bring about a collective, systematic transformation.
The sacrifices of OFWs uplift our economy and build up our image as hardworking individuals. However, honoring their sacrifices by calling them Bagong Bayani will never be enough. To show gratitude, the government must protect them and promote their rights. It must create safeguarding programs that proactively defend them from illegal recruitment, sexual abuse, and exploitation. To value their labor means removing bureaucracy so that they can process their documents easier and ensuring that corrupt politicians do not pocket their remittances. It is also high time that the government must prioritize addressing the very systemic issues of the country's current situation that force OFWs to seek opportunities outside the country in the first place. When the dust settles, they can now entirely go back to the country they grew up in, but a country they now fully deserve and proudly showcase to the world.
Ang bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ng ginto't bulaklak, pag-ibig na sa kanyang